What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I like to take the time to give thanks to all who followed me in my journey of the contribution of the Black fighter. Now, those of you who know my channel know that I study and I research and report all weight divisions, fighters from every region, all nationalities, all eras. But it's something about the Black fighter that played a tremendous role in boxing. And without the Black fighter, boxing would never be complete. Because the first fighters from this country, America, were Black fighters, Tom Molyneux and Bill Richmond. They both went over to England and fought the same fighter, Tom Cribb. And the injustices began there. But boxing didn't just begin in 1681. Combat had been from the beginning of time. Cain and Abel and forward. Jim Figs was a swordsman before he began to box. He retired undefeated. But the Black fighter never got a shot at the title. And when he did try to fight, in 1810, Tom Molyneux, Tom Cribb, who was champion, there was injustice there as well. He was hit over the head with a pipe. He was accused of having pellets in his hands. He had knocked out Tom Cribb, but they gave Tom Cribb time to recover. And it was injustice situations and circumstances like that that cleansed the mind. I've spoken to George, Glassjaw Boxing. He basically controls boxing in Connecticut. An unbelievable historian he was and is. Been to the home of George, looked at his memorabilia, looked at his collection. Mind-boggling. One of the most extensive robe collections that I know of. George has so much memorabilia. He has records, contracts of fighters. Sal Rapper, Paul Cavalier, R.I.P. to Paul Cavalier. He taught me a great deal at Lenny Shaw's boxing gym. He has sparred with Gene Tunney. He has seen Sam Langford spar and hit the heavy bag. He has watched Tiger Flowers and Kid Norfolk. I received first-hand information from these gentlemen. My dad and I created scrapbooks from the 1600s to the 1990s. Many of them I will not show on YouTube. Have information that is not on the internet. And I'm telling you this because I'm going to show you some fighters of my interest as I end this series, the contribution of the Black fighters. And at the end of this video, you'll see a montage of some of the greatest Black fighters in boxing history. So thanks for your time. Bobby Dobbs, born January 1868, Cartersville, Georgia. He died December 25th, 1930 in Charleston, South Carolina. He stood 5 foot 8 inches and he weighed 125 to 136 pounds. He was a lightweight that fought Joe Gans. Phenomenal fighter was Bobby Dobbs. Raymond Dozier, they called him Battling Dozier. He was born in Wickecook, Kansas. He stood 5 foot 9 inches and he weighed 143 pounds to 164 pounds. Very good fighter was Battling Dozier. Bob Armstrong was more than just a sparring partner for Jim Jeffries and Bob Fitzsimmons. But he was also a colored heavyweight champion. He was born September 4th, 1873 in Rogersville, Tennessee. He died January 5th, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois. He stood 6 foot 2.5 inches and he weighed 185 to 217 pounds. Phenomenal fighter was Bob Armstrong. Jack Johnson and Jim Johnson, two very good fighters of their day. Jack Johnson would become colored heavyweight champion when he defeated Denver Ed Martin in 1903 and became heavyweight champion when he defeated Tommy Burns in 1908 in Sydney, Australia. One of the greatest defensive fighters was Jack Johnson. I want to also add Jack Johnson had invented a wrench. He was a musical composer. He owned nightclubs. And he was the heavyweight champion of the world. Here you're looking at Evaldo Valdez. His name was Black Bill. He was a man of rubber. Born 1905 in Havana, Cuba. Died April 14th, 1933. He committed suicide. He stood 5'3" and he weighed 109 to 115 pounds. Very good Cuban fighter was Evaldo Valdez, better known as Black Bill. Charles Henry Blackburn, better known as Jack Blackburn. They called him Chappie. He was born May 20th, 1884 in Kentucky. He died April 24th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. Stood 5'10" and he weighed 135 to 160 pounds. Jack Blackburn was in a ring with fighters such as Sam Langford and Joe Gans, just to name a few. But he was a trainer for one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all times, Joe Louis. Phenomenal fighter was Jack Blackburn. Dixie Kid, welterweight champion. He defeated the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott. But the referee, Duck Sullivan, had put a wager on that particular fight. And the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott, would once again become welterweight champion of the world. It was a fixed fight. Not on behalf of Barbados Demon, but it was rigged by the referee, Duck O'Sullivan. Cuba's Bobby Brown fought out of Philadelphia. He was born 1905. He died November 7th, 1929 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He weighed 170 to 175 pounds. Cuba's Bobby Brown. Very, very good fighter. Yes, such men as Jack Lewis. And Joe Butler. He was born May 18th, 1966 in Pennsylvania. He stood 6 foot and weighed 156 to 175 pounds. He was a manager, but he wound up becoming a colored champion. Great fighter was Joe Butler. George Byers, born June 25th, 1872 in Charlottetown, PA. He died April 10th, 1937 in Boston, Massachusetts. He stood 5 foot and 8.5 inches. He weighed 150 to 165 pounds. He was a very good fighter, George Byers. Rufus Cameron was born May 7th, 1887, Texas. He died November 24th, 1943, Los Angeles, California. Stood 6 foot and weighed 176 pounds. He was self-managed. His name was Rufus Cameron. Frank Childs, what a fighter he was out of Texas. He was born July 17th, 1867. He stood 5 foot 9 inches and weighed 160 to 185 pounds. He was a dynamic fighter, was Frank Childs. Cornelius Clisby, who was better known as Neil Clisby, born July 26, 1903 in Los Angeles, California. He died March 2nd, 1965 in Los Angeles, California. Stood 5 foot 10.5 inches and weighed 187 to 198 pounds. He was a very good fighter, was Neil Clisby. Sparred with Joe Louis several times in exhibitions. George H. Cold, they call him the Trenton T. Warmer. He was born February 4th, 1874, Bordentown, New Jersey. Died February 17th, 1923, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He stood 5 foot 7.5 inches and he weighed 145 to 150 pounds. George H. Cole, the Trenton T. Warmer. Young Tommy Coleman. He was born June 5th, 1888 in Delaware. He stood 5'9.5" and he weighed 141 to 152 pounds. Tommy Coleman. They called him Young Tommy Coleman. Sylvester Cotton. He was known as George Kid Cotton. Born March 22nd, 1883 in New Orleans, Louisiana. He died September 3rd, 1925 in New York, New York. He stood 6 foot and he weighed 189 to 199 pounds. Very good fighter was Sylvester Cotton, better known as George Kid Cotton. Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, was born April 1st, 1868 in Columbus, Georgia. Died January 1943 in Chelsea, London, England. He stood 5'10" and he weighed 160 pounds. Very good fighter was Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, wound up becoming a colored champion. Frank Clouser, Jamaican, British West Indies. He stood 6 foot and he weighed 189 pounds. Frank Clouser. Robert Bobby Dobbs. They called him Bobby Dobbs. He was born January 1868 in Cartersville, Georgia. He died December 25th, 1930 in Charleston, South Carolina. He stood 5'8.5" and he weighed 125 to 136 pounds. Bobby Dobbs was in the ring with Joe Gans. Very good fighter. He was a southpaw and converted into orthodox. Bobby Dobbs, tremendous fighter he was. I'll tell you, Bobby Dobbs was some fighter. He was in the ring with the Barbados Demon, Joe Walcott, and put up a good account of himself. Salute to Bobby Dobbs. The Kentucky Rosebud. He was born November 18th, 1856, Raleigh, North Carolina. Died May 4th, 1930, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Stood 5'4". He weighed 115 to 128 pounds. His name was Walter Egerton. They called him the Kentucky Rosebud. I like to salute featherweight Danny Edwards. He was born July 1st, 1898. Died May 17th, 1959. Weighed 118 to 126 pounds. He stood 5'2", and he was a ball of dynamite. Very underestimated lightweight was Black Griffo. Very strong. Very, very powerful. If you followed my channel, you heard me mention Black Fitzsimmons. Kid Monday was born January 15th, 1878 in Marlin, South Carolina. He stood 6'1" and he weighed 170 to 180 pounds. He was self-managed. Useless cannon. They called him Black Fitzsimmons. Lawrence Samuel Gans. They called him Larry Gans. He was born December 12, 1900 in Toronto, Canada. He died July 26, 1983. He stood 6'1" and he weighed 175 pounds. And his name was Larry Gans. I want to introduce you to Joey Hicks, better known as Allentown Joe Gans. Born May 6, 1894 in Virginia, and he died August 12, 1953 in New York. He stood 5'9" and he weighed 155 to 165 pounds. He was a colored champion. His name was Allentown Joe Gans. Baby Joe Gans, they called him Gerald Slaughter. He was born December 4th, 1899, El Paso, Texas. He died May 6, 1970 in Los Angeles, California. He stood 5'6" and he weighed 135 pounds. And his name was Baby Joe Gans. When I introduce you to Cyril Quinton, his name is Panama Joe Gans. Born November 14th, 1896, Barbados, British West Indies. He died June 28th, 1968 in New York. And he stood 5'9" and he weighed 135 to 160 pounds. Panama Joe Gans was a very, very good fighter. He was. I'll get into his career more on my channel, but you can check out Panama Joe Gans on my channel. I've done a profile on him. Very good fighter he was. He was avoided by many. Cleary James, his name was Young Joe Gans, or better known as Nobby Joe Gans. New Orleans Joe Gans. He was born July 13th, 1896 in Grand Island, Louisiana. He stood 5'7" and he weighed 126 to 137 pounds. He was a colored champion. He was a hell of a fighter. Perhaps one of the most underrated heavyweights in the colored heavyweight division. His name was Sam McVeigh. He had an outstanding fight with Joe Jeanette in 1909 in Paris, France. Unbelievable fight that was. Check out Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series as I go through Joe Jeanette and Sam McVeigh's fight. A historical affair. George Godfrey, they called him Old Chocolate, was born March 20th, 1892, in Prince Edward Island. He died September 10th, 1901, Boston, Massachusetts. He stood 5 foot 10 inches and he weighed 175 pounds. He was self-managed. He was a colored heavyweight champion. He would lose his title to the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. George Godfrey, phenomenal fighter he was. I'd like to introduce you to another George Godfrey. He was also a colored heavyweight champion. Phenomenal fighter he was George Godfrey. Harry Wills would lose his colored heavyweight championship belt in 1926 when there was somewhat of a foul that was given in a fight between him and Jack Sharkey. And for that reason, they disqualified Jack Sharkey. And they also took away his colored heavyweight championship belt, and it went to George Godfrey. They disqualified Harry Wills, and the belt went to George Godfrey. Julius Williams, better known as Jack McVeigh, was born June 8th, 1905 in Athens, Georgia. He died October 29th, 1975 in Harlem, New York. He stood 5 foot 9 inches and he weighed 147 pounds. He was a colored middleweight champion and lost his title to Harry Smith. Jack McVeigh, phenomenal fighter, very popular in Harlem. Meet the Harlem Thunderbolt. His name was Harry Smith. He was born October 28, 1907 in Jamaica, British West Indies. He died September 19, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois. He would pass through Harlem, New York, where he would earn the colored middleweight championship belt, that he would take that belt from Jack McVeigh. What a fight in 1928. As a matter of fact, Harry Smith was also asked to join the Olympic team in 1928. He turned it down because he did not want to be a part of the discrimination, and he also had a promise for the colored middleweight championship belt against Jack McVeigh. His family owned half of Harlem, and his father had owned a taxi cab and a limousine service. Unbelievable fighter, having ranked number 4, Harry Smith, the Harlem Thunderbolt.